Our guest today is Professor Judith Reisman.
Hi.
Good afternoon,
Good
Professor Reisman.
afternoon.
Judith.
Yes, good afternoon. Good
It's an honor,
afternoon.
it's an honor for us to meet with you. I can say a few words about you. You have a master's and PhD from Case Western Reserve University. Professor Reisman as a research professor at Liberty University School of Law in Lynchburg, Virginia. She completed a comprehensive analysis of images of children, crime, and violence in so-called men's magazines between 1986 and 1990, when she was a consultant to the United States Department of Justice. She wrote several books and founded Reisman Institute. It's a non-profit corporation dedicated to education the public about the dangers children face from the onslaught of explicit sexuality and sexual exploitation. Our meeting will have two parts. In the first part will 45 minutes, and Professor Reisman will tell us about changes in the United States after the Second World War, and especially about Dr. Alfred Kinsey and his work. After 45 minutes,
Yes.
Yeah.
So am I supposed to speak now?
Yeah, and after your speech will be a session of questions and answers, and will dure 30 minutes. I can share now because Professor will use PowerPoint presentation. Now I will get this presentation here. And Judith, I give you a voice. And please tell me next when I can change the slide.
Okay, I will do that. Now we're struggling through this whole thing. Yes, thank you. First of all, it's an honor to be able to speak with you. And of course, anyone and everyone should be interested in these issues. It pertains to your education, obviously. The title that I have chosen, Academics Destruction of the USA, pertains to the role of the intellectuals, the role of our PhDs who have entered into, or are lawyers in the same situation, who have then entered into the public policy of decisions that we've been making since World War II. Next. Yes, very good. So we're going to give you a backgrounder, 70 years of time I guess we have 45 minutes. Next. We'll move right along. I did my degree at Case Western Reserve in 1968. And my PhD was really supposed to be on the effects of pornography, which that is something you're dealing with, but it ended up being on Aristotle. That's a long story, which I'm able to talk with you about at some point, but there's the building and there's where it all began. Thank you. Next. Okay, the history is what we're talking about. Kinsey, Dr. Alfred Kinsey, was to sexuality, I'm quoting, was to sexuality what Freud was to psychiatry, Madame Curie was to radiation, Einstein to physics. We based a whole generation, now it's 3 generations because that was 1991, on an entire generation of education of sexologists on Kinsey, and then this was from a interview I did with Phil Donahue, who was a very popular host and very anti, and who fought me every inch of the way on that Donahue show. You may get a glimpse of that, I don't remember. Next. And he says he was not a bad guy, though he was a great guy. Kinsey, it turns out, of course, you probably know the name of, yeah. Who is she again?
She is Margaret Sanger.
Thank you very much, Margaret Sanger. This is 1942 foundation of all of the abortion movement, but more than that, also sex education in the schools in her own way. And of course, the other guy on the other side, they both shared the same lawyer, by the way, and were defended in courts in the United States by the same lawyer. And that was 1948. The other person, the other eugenic specialists who is well known is Dr. Alfred Kinsey. We'll be following him next. Who was Dr. Kinsey? I don't know how many of you have heard of him or read his materials, probably less. You've read the second or the third generation imitator quotes from sexual behavior.
Co to jest? Rajda.
Halo, halo, prosimy się
Łaś.
połączyć.
Znaczek patrzy bezczelnie.
Marcin Kamiński, zamknij się.
Am I hearing? I'm hearing something. All right, continuing. He wrote Sexual Behavior in the Human Male in 1948, which was called The Revolution, the Sexual Revolution, which of course you are all suffering from today. And then in 1953, he wrote Sexual Behavior in the Human Female. And that was the follow-up to the original material that he did. These were all lies. I'll go into that shortly. Father of the sexual revolution. He was a mass child sexual abuser. He was a bi-homosexual, an S&M. These are all documented. I don't say this unless it's completely documented. S&M, which is sadomasochistic addict. He was a pornography filmmaker and an addict. He died of STIs or STDs and violent masturbation complications we lost the bottom of the slide, but anyway, called orchitis, which was violent abuse to one's genitals and in combination with venereal disease. But he was never known as this kind of man. He was just known as a uptight, professor who was married, just a middle-class guy, he wore a tie and so on, and he always spoke in such language that the public would suspect that he was just a normal average American. Absolutely untrue, and that has, taken its toll. Next. He created the created the belief that children are sexual from birth. We are all sexual beings, which justified then teaching every kind of sexual act from GLBTQ, all of that, in our schools at the college level, which went down to the high school level, which then eventually was at the K through kindergarten level. And this is a picture taken from the Kinsey Institute here. Next. Thank you. Here he is. I'm on automation. So maybe if you hit the I don't know, if you click it, maybe it'll give us more, but maybe not. This is in Berkeley in 1948, University of Berkeley, California at Berkeley. This massive population would become our leaders. They would become our doctors, our lawyers, our sex educators, our fathers, everything. They are listening to him with complete devotion. The LBGT, they begin the LBGT, sociosexual contagion. Next, that's Kinsey down in the corner there. Now here he is, he went to Portugal, Canada, Europe, the UK. Kinsey was lecturing to university students across the world. Here he is in Copenhagen, lecturing to people who are, you don't get to see the whole picture, but anyway, beautiful, beautiful building, intellectuals in Denmark, Sweden, all over, who are listening to his every word because he was the truth teller of the time, allegedly. Okay, down at the bottom here on the left, he is in Germany, lecturing to doctors and lawyers, again in Germany. That's a long story. His relationship with a Nazi pedophile actually brought him to Germany after the war. This was in 1956, but we won't have time, but I'll drop that little tidbit in there for you. And there on the right, he is lecturing to gynecologists, to doctors throughout the United States. He's teaching them the truth about human sexuality based on his alleged research. Next. He is the man who created what is called the Kinsey scale. From this, he proved, allegedly, by drawing this pretty little scale, that that sexuality is fluid, that 10 to 30% of our population, he said later it was more than that actually, was homosexual males. He said that he concluded 0% of the population is really exclusively heterosexual. You can find this scale by typing in the Kinsey scale on Google, and you'll get millions of hits, various kinds of descriptions. Now, you get a 6 if you are exclusively heterosexual. So, but the bias was toward the middle, which was that half, mostly more than half of the population is bisexual. And so we all float around, but we never end up actually being exclusively heterosexual. Next. His fraudulent sexuality research, well, no one noticed that 84% of that research was conducted, 84% of his people were found during World War II. The year, this is right out of his own book. It's in my book, all this information. In 1941 to 45, these are all the people he interviewed. And the only people that you could interview at that time who could speak to you were people who had nothing to do with the military. Next. He had a soundproof lab in the university where he was conducting his research. He made sure it was soundproof because he was engaged in so much sadomasochistic activity. There was a lot of screaming that had to all be covered up. People shouldn't know about it. And he also conducted sex activity the attic through the top window. Also sadomasochistic activity. This was the man who directed human sexuality for the United States and therefore spread throughout the next. Of course, we like that picture. Next, there we go. So if he was doing all his research during World War II, who did he interview, right? The soldiers and the people working in %85% of his population engaged in fornication. That was against the law. Most of them masturbated. Prostitution, 69% used prostitutes or were engaged in prostitution. 16% had sex with animals. And there we have his homosexuality, which would be at least 10% to 37%. Next, thank you. And he said he interviewed 4,441 women. It's all in his book. It's all in his book. He interviewed 4,441 women, and there was never any woman who had ever been raped, which would be very interesting, you know, especially today with the huge increases or the feminist movement and the number, what is it? That other movement that we have lately, you know, where you believe all the women because they've all suffered rape. And truly the rape problem is very real in the United States and probably in the rest of the world. So there are your data on masturbation and adultery and so on, and no rape and no venereal disease, absolutely no venereal disease. And of course, no abortion, right? No, we had under 1%, he said. Next. Okay, he also defamed the Black community, very important. If I had an hour to spend on that, I could do it. Kinsey slandered the Black community. These were all young women who were graduates from his university at the same year that he was teaching there, that he was saying more about Black women than Black magazines did, because they could have a lot more faith in this old white guy who was asking them sexual questions about their lives. This was their Indiana's Black sorority. Next. And yet he was commanding new knowledge about the Black community based upon what he said that they were engaged in. This is the most important thing, really, as far as I'm concerned, that got me interested. These are in his book, he writes about multiple orgasms in what he called pre-adolescent males, which included babies. A 5-month-old baby, he claimed, had 3 orgasms. He didn't have an answer for the time because these were all children who used stopwatches. They were timed for these sexual orgasms, he called them. 11-month-old baby and another 11-month-old, a 4-year-old who he claimed had 26 orgasms in 24 hours. You are building your sex education worldwide on the claims of a man who had tortured children around the clock and said so in his book. Next. When I went back and looked, I said, he wouldn't say what an orgasm was. He wouldn't do that. Well, he did. And this was in this is page, I think it was 160. It's off the slide here. He broke the children, 196 of them, all boys, into 6 orgasm types. He broke them into percentages. And by the way, these are all being quoted still today in textbooks and in law journals worldwide. So he said, you know, some fought their partner, that is the man who was raping them. Okay. He said 8% of the children fought their partner, 22% rigid sobs and so on, sadism and hysteria among 5%, convulsions 17%, fainting, collapse 3%, twitching, spasm 4%. He divided them. These are his percentages, and these are the percentages he defined as orgasm. Why is this pertinent? Because it underlay every decision that has been made at the US Supreme Court on sodomy, every decision that has been made on human sexuality since the American Law Institute Model Penal Code. Next. Here he is This picture absolutely shocks me. It's in all his biographies, laudatory. These are all laudatory biographies. They have him he was showing these little children at the Kinsey Institute, at Indiana University, forced animal sex scenes and porcupines having sex. These children are being traumatized. This is what's going on really every day in pretty much in our schools, in grammar schools. The children are being traumatized. They are seeing and hearing sexual things, sexual activities. Even adults are not able to deal with because they're so pornographic and obscene. So there are two ladies in the back, his wife and another lady, who you can't see in this, but who are smiling happily. And there's Kinsey, who is smiling happily as he watches all these children having to be traumatized by the porcupine sex that they're seeing, sex acts. Next. All right, now you could maybe clip, I don't know if this will work. We forgot to check. Can you click that that little arrow there at the bottom? This was the Donahue show. Or maybe click in the middle, Andre. Andre? No, yeah. No, it won't work. Too bad. Anyway, okay, this was the Donahue show. And Donahue was defending the Kinsey Institute and saying how wonderful everything Kinsey did was wonderful. But I made him put up the slide on the children being sexually assaulted, and that really traumatized poor Donahue. And the defense given for that activity, one of the speakers there, who is also being interviewed, defended it all. He said, yes, but Kinsey only listened to pedophiles who had stopwatches and who recorded their thing. That was his defense. Again, I cannot emphasize, you have based, and much of what's going on in Poland would be based the same on Kinsey's frauds, on his pederast, activities and violence to the children. And then the second generation defends that and says that the third generation speaker, teacher, and so on. Next. And very important, this guy, Hugh Hefner on the left, is that my left, your right? I don't know. Anyway, Hugh Hefner, who created Playboy, he was a virgin at age 22 in college, which was the case with most American boys at the time, college kids. And at 22, that was not that unusual. And then he read Kinsey's book as part of his education in school, in college. And he said, Kinsey is the scientist, I will be his pamphleteer. Now, I don't know if that word has the same significance in Poland, but that is the man who puts his belief system, like communism, into easy little pamphlets that can go out to everybody. And he did it through this magazine, Playboy. Next. Playboy slandered the greatest generation, public morality and church. He slandered everything. Kinsey slandered, and therefore Playboy slandered. These are all, supposed to be preachers sexually abusing children. Next. So we began to see in Playboy in the 70s, little girl is leaving this old man and she says, you call that being molested? In this other one, she says, I'm playing Truth and Consequences with Uncle. Not to worry, Mama. Yeah. So, you began to see these cartoons throughout all, and it starts in the 60s, late 60s, all these cartoons which would groom men into laughing at, and boys who were reading this stuff, and it doesn't hurt children to be sexually abused. Next. And there we are in 1978, Brooke Shields as a 10-year-old child is in Playboy as Pretty Baby, quite naked, quite exposed. Another little girl, famous, 1977, at 14 years. They say mature behind her years. We've moved from cartoons into pictorials, but it's pictures, but it's much easier to do the worst things with cartoons, by the way. Next. The big news here we're getting is that there's a lot more direct eroticism in a small child's body than most adults are willing to acknowledge. That is that we're too uptight, we are secretive. Playboy would tell us the truth. Playboy writes this in 1976 and under kids stuff. Next. And NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association, which is an association of pederasts, actually. They are on the web, and they have been until very recently with the pictures of Kinsey. And he says the current hysteria over sex offenders may affect the ability of man and children to work out adjustment for some years. They're quoting Dr. Kinsey on the NAMBLA website for good reason. He was one of them. Next page. And this was when I was working for the Department of Justice, images of children, crime, and violence at Playboy, Penthouse, and Hustler. And I was being interviewed by Dr. Falwell on his television show. And he did the rare thing, next, of read out what was done to me because of what I found. And that was the Department of Justice actually attacked me for distributing the information about the child sexual abuse in Playboy, Penthouse, and Hustler, as well as the Kinsey Institute. Quote, please advise all staff, the report, that's my report, should not be duplicated or sent through the mails, end quote. Why? Because it included child pornography, as Dr. Falwell said. Well, then why they don't go after the publishers of child pornography instead of the person who is assigned to do the research and to distribute that for the public. Next. Now we've moved into where the psychological groups were at that time. Persons age 7 can share full responsibility for sexual behavior, said the Group for the Advancement of Psychiatry, 1950, Manfred Guttmacher. This will go into the psychological field completely without challenge. Thank you. Next. Kinsey's data were the points by which we steered, said Manfred Guttmacher, Group for the Advancement of Psychiatry. Next. And then research on human sexuality can be divided into the pre and post-Kinsey eras. The National Research Council on AIDS and Intravenous Drug Use in 1989. This now enters the Model Penal Code, American Law Institute, the American Law Institute, which would accredit all of the law schools across the country. Of course, fully supported by the Rockefeller Foundation. Kinsey is supported by the Rockefeller Foundation, and people who want to get their grants approved and get money from the Rockefeller Foundation are not going to challenge anything that they have supported. Next. Okay, pre and post Kinsey, anything legal can be taught, urged in schools, K, that's kindergarten through age 12. Obscenity is legal now. It's against the law in the United States. You get prison or fines, but it is legal now if you teach in schools, if you give children obscenity, but if you define it as education, that's K through 12. Rape used to get death in 18 states, life in 22. In up to in 1948, post 1955, it now can get you 6 months to 4 years, statutory rape and so on. Adultery could get prison or fines. Now it's decriminalized. Child custody used to go to the mother. Now it's financially based, essentially, yes. Abortion could get, it could get, serious ramifications, but it was allowed if you gave grounds. Now you can teach abortion in schools, and you can, in the United States, you can actually often be taken to the journal. Child molestation is a relatively minor crime. That's obvious, even to the most prudish neo-Puritans. Now, we're talking about the Georgia Law Review in 1969. That's the South. That's not even the New York journals. We are talking about the spread of this belief system through the belief in science, in intellectuals, in the academic world. We are talking about that spreading all across the country through the laws. Next. The current conditions. I love this. Are there not charms by which the property of youth and maidhood may not be abused? Is that not so? From Othello, Act 1, Scene 1. Thank you. Next. I mean, he said so. Oh, this is a beautiful one. If you could get it to, if you can click it, if it's possible to click on it and get it to talk. get the, okay, it won't. All right. Well, this was Fox Searchlight did a film called Kinsey, starring Liam Neeson. And in that film, which was broadcast, it was a feature film all across the country, United States and the world, I suppose, Western world, starring, as I said, Liam Neeson, very famous guy in the United States. And this talks about Kinsey, allegedly, and teaches you that Kinsey did wonderful things for the world, telling us the truth about sex. Nobody really knew about sex before Kinsey, yeah, in 1948. Okay, figure that one out. But anyway, but people believed it, and he told us the truth about ourselves, which is the entry into fluid sexuality, the entry into gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, all of the transgender activity today, which is supported through the universities and now through K through 12 too. Next. You missed a really good piece there, by the way. There are no authorities, said Mary Calderon, medical director of the Sex Information Education Council of the United States. Believe me, in this field, this is 1969. Did I say 1969? It should have been saying 1969. Believe me, in this field, we are not experts. No, there were no experts because they had to get the support from the science on sex. the only place you could get scientific support for the beliefs in sex education were Dr. Kinsey's two books. Next. Now, winning the battle for sex education and the schools. These are all SICUS. You see at the bottom, a SICUS publication. That was Mary Calderon, who just said, we're not experts. Well, we're not experts, but they became experts. They made themselves experts worldwide, internationally. Okay, next. Ah, yes, this was very important. In 1965, Playboy did a big special. Bishops would send pedo priests to sexologists for psychosexual treatment at St. Luke's, which was run by a closet pedophile who died of AIDS. Kinsey's trained sexologists would use pornography in their seminaries to do what they call formation. The 1960s and onward were rejecting Orthodox Catholic applicants. Below these we have a priest here and a rabbi, and they're all talking. This is in Playboy magazine. So he's bringing the religious community into control. Dr. John Money and Fred Berlin are the mental health professionals most successfully treating paraphilic disorders in the past 15 years, 1970, at Johns Hopkins. And of course, Dr. Money was at best a pedo pusher. He was a child pornographer. He died, he committed a suicide, as I believe. And Dr. Fred Berlin was advising the Catholic Church. Much of this I found out through Goodbye Good Men, how liberals brought corruption into the church. Next. And the Institute for the Advanced Study of Human Sexuality would be training the priests, the doctors, the law enforcement, and so on. They use what they called the FUCK ARAMA. That was training internationally. They were never accredited, it turns out. We find that out just recently. We all knew that. Those of us knew it, but it became public. They were never accredited by any higher educational institution. They gave masters, PhDs, teachers' degrees, all kinds of degrees. They use child pornography. This is in their book called Meditations on the Gift of Sexuality. That's Dr. Pomeroy up in the corner, and he is quite clearly, you can clearly see all this. These are orgies, masturbating, and that's the foundational training center for what was taught to internationally to the people who would be teaching your people. Next. You can get 6-unit credit for continuing education from a pedophile organization before you act, which I got when I attended their conference. Next. The obscenity education in our schools, K through 12, perfectly normal is being taught. The one on the left was 1974. I learned about that when my children were going to school. They were told that all kinds of sex acts, whether they were oral, whether they were normal or natural, are all normal, all natural, all healthy, no problems. Next. We know that the sex offender treatment that allegedly cured our people, this was from the Government Accounting Office report to them, and Attorney General's Commission on Pornography reported too. No effective treatment plan for pedophile offenders currently exists. The only viable alternative is substantial incarceration. Next. There can be no informed consent given by children to pornography. Absolutely impossible. You all know that the child's brain, the human brain does not mature, if it ever does, until roughly age 25. And yet children are exposed to highly traumatizing sexual information at all levels of schooling, from elementary to military, middle to high school. Next. Oh, this is really lovely, but you don't get to hear it. You know, it's a very pretty thing. What did I talk about? I talked there about the butterflies. No, the bringing in the moths. Yeah, to start a silk industry in the United States. We brought in these little gall moths. Well, anyway, moths to start a silk industry. Unfortunately, they ate all of the verdant of the trees and so forth, instead of starting the silk industry. And I compared that to what's been happening with how did we get rid of these gall wasps, was spreading a smell that was super normal into the air. That was the only thing that stopped the reproduction of the moths and saved our trees. And we compare that to pornography. Super normal images of women, super normal, descriptions of sex activities, which absolutely destroys the ability of a growing child to understand what's normal and to be able to engage in a healthy sexual life and marital life, of course. Next. I mean, it's so much better there. Yeah, we looked at the newspapers, New York Times index of on when did these activities show up as in the New York Times. In 1973, pornography finally got a heading. It was one of the first times. It was the first time. 1975, child porn got a heading. We call these clusters. 1977, incest. 1980, child lust murder. 1982, child sex rings. 84, serial murder. 86, autoerotic asphyxia. 88, ritualistic killing. So you can see the growth of addiction, the growth of sexual violence over time. And this is only attributed to the growth of the pornography industry, which was completely protected by multi-billion-dollar industry itself. Next. These are our professors who've been just recently arrested for child pornography and rape. Two of these professors, one on the left-hand corner on the side, Ben Levin, created the sex education curricula in Canada. There's another guy who I remember where he's probably not here. Anyway, they're all big professors. The other one was created the sex curricula for another country. And of course we have our country, yeah. So they're all children of the Kinsey era. Next. And 10% of our students in school said that they're targets of educators' sexual misconduct. 33% of the teachers who have been, or those who have been sexually abusing the children, are females, which is absolutely outrageously outrageous. I mean, it cannot stem from anything but from this massive change in our visual and our belief system about sex via pornography. Next. We had 17,000 peer sexual assaults in school from 2011 to 2015. Now, these are not just, insults. These included sodomy, rape, object penetration. These are strictly pornography learned. And what unwanted fondling, that means forced hands on the child's body. This starts at age a grade 5 and goes up to, or age, yeah. Grade age 5 to age 19 to age 19. Of course, its height is at age 14 and 15 and 13. These are children sexually penetrating, sodomizing, raping other children. This did not exist. It wasn't just a question of more reporting. This did not exist in the United States of America, probably anywhere else, and it's probably occurring other places, until pornography and until it moved into the schools and the intellectuals defended it. Next. This also is, you could see it if you could see it, but you can't. We had 1,700 child pornography people investigated at the Pentagon. That's highly, these are highly important positions and require approval and careful checking out and so on. These were never really investigated. Same thing, the pressure of those in power had its way. We had so many downloading, caught, but never investigated further. 2010. Next. We have the infanticide bill in New York, signed off by Governor Cuomo, which allows you to murder babies when they're just out of the womb. Next. Who's involved? Well, Big Pharma is making a fortune from all these dysfunctions. You can, that's obvious. Big Pharma is absolutely, there's no comparison. It started with the monies that they were making from divorces, but now it's much more than that, especially with GLBT and changing the bodies and that sort of thing. Big pornography is making a fortune, big sexology is making a fortune, and each group feeds each other. Next. What is the future? All right. We stand before the judgment seat of God so that each of us must give an account of himself and herself to God. Romans. Next. Diffusion of innovation. We know that based on the data and marketing, and their marketing information is based on proofs of sales, that 2.5% of the population, if they're leaders, if they're movers and shakers, and if they adopt something new, then usually you'll get 13.5% who will follow that. Another 34% will follow that. Late majority, 34%, and laggards, they will always be 16%. Yes, they will adopt a Marxist innovation. They will adopt a rape innovation. They will adopt all kinds of innovations if they have been propagandized sufficiently, and they have been for 70 years. Next. We have education and law will lead the way. We've got to retrain our teachers, our priests, our lawyers, our prosecutors, our judges. We've got to retrain them as to where this all came from and how absolutely debilitating and destructive this has all been. Next. That's where I was in Croatia, and we did well. We stopped the sex education for a time in Croatia. Next. This is, I think, in Jamaica, right? We did the same in Jamaica. We defeated a GLBT program there temporarily. We'll see what happens next. These people don't give up. And oh yes, and let's not forget, in South Africa in 1994, I won against Playboy. Playboy accused me of libel and slander because I said that Playboy was a major child pornographer. And they said, accused me of libel and slander. And the judge in the Netherlands, after I sent all the documents, the pictures, the pages, and so on, ruled in my favor and said, you want to sue her? Do it in the United States. I repeat, they would never, Playboy, none of these guys would ever sue me in the United States. They would never do it. Because if the public knew how they had been manipulated, how men have been manipulated, women, children, all these years, that would be the end. Well, I don't know about the end, but it certainly would be devastating. Next. Oh, yeah, I love this. It's just a picture. Alfred Kinsey Monument. They were trying to put up a monument to him in Indiana, at the Indiana, University of Indiana. There's the S&M sadomasochistic handbook in his pocket, and he's flashing these children and the people going, on the way to Indiana. The amazing thing is that this appeared in the Indianapolis paper. That's when they were trying to put that up, a statue, but there was so much rejection from the public, which had learned something from what I've been doing, that they gave up on the statue, and I don't know where they are right now. But next. Okay, EWTN, the Catholic Network. You should please go on there. This goes into great detail. Marriage and the family under attack after undermining Christian civilization, respect for God's law. It's a documentary. It sheds lights on the philosophical, the historical causes. It identifies the socialist, communist ideology that rebranded themselves all over the world as liberal and as progressive to push their agenda. You should please go on. This was just published, I think, this end of this year, last year, maybe. Next. Oh, yes. And the Kinsey app is promoting global child trafficking and rape, murder, anything worldwide, because it's anonymous. You can report any age sex crimes. They will cover it up. It is a survey. You can get it on your, you should please try now, look on your phone. You can get it there. And you can report anything that you've done. And no matter how bad that is, if it's really bad and criminal, they simply will not put it up, because they put everything up on a map, on a global map, but they'll never report you. They call you a citizen scientist. So every child rapist who wants to be called a citizen scientist, who regards what he's doing as contributing to science, which many do, can contribute their rapes and their crimes, murders could be, to the Kinsey Reporter, because they promise never to reveal their sources. Citizen Go asks, please stop the Kinsey Institute, protect the children. That is on your on the website, is up there. The Citizen Go website, Stop the Kinsey Institute. They've got 35,000 people who signed up on that. Please add to it. Next. And those are some of my books, a few, and some additional materials. Those are the tools available. And there's my website. Next. I think that's the end. Yes, that's the end. We are defending a child's right to a moral society. And what time is it?
It's 5 minutes to 9. To 9 in Poland.
Okay, so how much time did I use?
55 minutes.
Well, it's a little bit.
Oh, it's very good.
Oh, okay.
We'll have 20 minutes for questions, and I open the session, questions and answers. I'm impressed for this information which you have talked about. And who wants to ask the first question?
Come along now. Come on. Somebody.
Okay. Hello, it's me,
Hello.
Amanda. I have a question concerning pedophilia, because in the end, as far as I know, the pedophilia was classified as some sexual disorder or something like this. I can tell exactly because I'm not a specialist in this matter. So I wonder if you know what was the history in this matter of classification of pedophilia. And second thing is, what are the differences which make, according to the scientific associations,
Mhm.
the difference between pedophilia, which is bad or is classified as disorder,
Mhm.
and for example, homosexuality or other ways of expressing people's sexuality other than heterosexuality. Which I mean is, because I can obviously everyone can tell there's a huge harm done to children, as a consequence of a pedophilia act. But the thing is, which I've been wondering
Oh, well, yeah, there's been a battle. I mean, there's a huge battle in the United States right now. Pedophilia was almost declassified back a few years, 4 or 5 years, I think ago, almost declassified by the American Psychiatric Association, following a major article that was written by two fellows who also contribute to the Journal of Pedophilia, which was a journal by and for pedophiles. But anyway, nobody mentioned that. Anyway, it was almost declassified, but there was such a backlash against declassification, which I have to say I was part of, that it was just the American Psychiatric Association said, oh, we never really meant that. We never meant that. So at this point, it's still considered a disorder, but actually there are a lot of loopholes because it's under age 13, it's a disorder. There are a lot of little loopholes, but still being a pedophile, especially now, lots of people are being picked up for child pornography. They're not being, and as part of the child pornography, they are often, of course, sexually assaulting children. But even still, they are picked up for child pornography, which is finally a development. As to homosexuality, that of course is now considered absolutely fine, just as transgenderism will be considered fine shortly. But nobody talked, and it was a concerted effort to hide the experiences that I did a lot of research on this, to hide the experiences that homosexual males, and to some extent females, had in their childhood. You know, there's been a huge effort to make sure, you know, the Born That Way, which is one of the, actually even Kinsey didn't say that homosexuals were born that way, although he was himself a bisexual. But the Born That Way concept is part of the vocabulary today. And that's an important part, because if you're born that way, then also pedophiles are claiming today that they're born that way. You can be born that way. You can be born that way if you're a sadist, a sadomasochist, a zoophile, or anything else. So the homosexual issue has been dropped essentially, but I think that's an unfair thing to do to the children who were being, who had experiences that caused them to give up their life as and their opportunity to be husbands, fathers, to live a normal life. Now there are quite a few recovering homosexual organizations. I think there were 35 the last I heard, and both for women and for men in the United States. And so, you know, there are recovering homosexuals. So that's exists. But now as we moved into transgender, most everything has kind of gone on the down low, as they would say. But pedophilia, because of the promotion, the huge, the huge spread of trafficking and trafficking of children and trafficking in child pornography, that now has risen itself again to another place. Actually, we're going back in essence to where we were, some of us, some states in 1935, when someone who would be raping a child, although it requires more than one child these days, and it's be a couple of times, may be imprisoned kind of permanently as a psychological risk to the population. I don't know how many states are doing that, but some are. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's very complex.
Thank you. Who wants to ask the next question?
And I would like to ask one question, and I would like to ask you, what do you think about Russian and American sociologist? He was named Peter Sorokin, and I think he wrote some book about American sexual revolution in 1956, and the book was translated into Polish, I know, several years ago. And I would like to ask you, what do you think about his works, his legacy, and did he describe American society of those time adequately, truthfully, or not?
Absolutely, absolutely. Sorokin, I don't know if I say his name properly. Sorokin, yeah. No, he was so ahead of his time. He said everything that was going to be happening. I mean, he was describing the huge problems that we now have. And he does not have a proper legacy at all here. He's ignored pretty much. Although I read his work with great admiration and just, wished I had a chance to know him. I recommend that book to all of you. If it's in Polish, you should absolutely read it. As a matter of fact, now that you mention, I'll go back and read it again.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Who wants to ask the next question? Kuba.
Hello, thank you very much. I wanted to ask a question. What would you say are the consequences of homosexual adoption of children?
Oh, very disastrous. Very disastrous. Male or female. Matter of fact, I used to collect the data on early on when homosexuals were picked up for having, abused the children in their midst, or that they had brought in. But that stopped being reported on, so that no reports there. But disastrous in the sense, if nothing else, we have reports from children themselves who've grown up in a homosexual and who love their parents. I mean, or their two, who love them, say, but talked about the disastrous experiences that they had living in a home that was a homosexual home, so that they were seeing things and experiencing things. And I'm not going to go. We don't have the data on the number of homosexual parents who allowed their children, but anyway. And they grow up with distorted feelings about males, and it's not good, and it would destroy there is no reason for homosexual males or females to have the right to bring up children. Children need a father and a mother, and hopefully a father and mother that are not using pornography in the house, which is a huge problem. Yeah. Because it's become more and more common, and that will allow their children to thrive.
Yeah, we hope to have a new law against pornography in Poland. I heard they're working the works on it.
Well, if you need any help, I'll happily send, you know, plenty of information.
Yeah. Who wants to ask the next question?
Come now.
Michał?
Okay, I can. I don't want to dominate the debate, but I would like to deep in the previous question I asked. Could you bring up the arguments which were give the arguments which were brought up by those who in the debate you mentioned in the debate on the normativity of pedophilia? What was their argument?
Well, the argument is essentially that, you know, they're born as pedophiles, that not all pedophiles, you know, necessarily assault children. There are what they call the virtuous pedophiles. And so therefore there should not be any attack on them. It's not an attack, but I mean, they should not be drummed out of school teaching and other kinds of places where they have access to children. Now, the Journal of Pedophilia, which I read I read all of the issues, which was by and for pedophiles, stated, and these are they're respected. I mean, these are the pedophiles who have respected positions of authority in their various countries who are on the board. So they had a journal of pedophilia. You could probably still get some of that on the web. Their initial journal said that as pedophiles, we want to develop a pedophile sensibility amongst the public. We believe that we have the right to access, you know, because we can give more love to children than children who don't have somebody to love them. Well, unfortunately, what we know is that love does not last often past age 13 or 14, depending on the age of the child, the pedophile and his predispositions, or pederast and his predispositions. So that there are huge problems connected with what they claim. And then when you read their writings, the writings themselves indict the movement as abnormal, absolutely, because you as a person who cares for the growth of child will see that these definitions, these, you know, are not what you want for children. You want them to grow and have access to a long life, and early sex activity is not going to facilitate a long life. And yes, most pedophiles do believe and have said that early sex activity is perfectly fine. I have the document that in which they identify, you know, the formal document in which they identify the need to give contraception to young children so that they can have sex at an early age. I attended the conference in Wales where one of the speakers spoke about the importance of allowing children to participate in pornographic pictures because it would give the children an income that would allow the child to remove himself from his home life, which perhaps was too restrictive, and so on. There are too many excuses around the whole notion of pedophiles and pederasts to even summarize. That would be a good thing to spend time doing. You're right.
And is the pedophile movement growing or declining, or what's the tendency? Because it seems that most of the arguments or the facts that you brought up were in the late 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and then they disappeared somehow, as far as I know, after the victims of the pedophiles came up and said what disastrous effects of their deeds has on them. So the question is whether the movement is in let's say in sexuology growing, or are the arguments being shared by less or more people?
That is a good, and I'm glad you brought that up about because following the expose of the children, the boys mostly, who were being abused by priests, okay, and them coming forward, you know, the adult males coming forward and speaking out in television and everywhere, and our media has no problem with priest abuse issues. They don't mind that. They don't want to deal with other kinds of abuse, but priest abuse they could talk about. And yeah, once that happened, it slowed the process of public announcements, public proclamations for the legitimacy of pedophilia. But I don't believe it's slowed down the actions at all, because we have such a massive flood of child pornography, you see, which is pedophilia, yeah? And you're getting so many people being arrested right and left. Of course, that was under Trump. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with Biden, but I doubt that there'll be as much arrests. Now, the huge amount of arrests for child pornography would mean that nothing slowed down at all, nothing. But the public spokespeople have slowed down. Yeah.
Kuba, you wanted to ask a question.
Yes, I have a 13-year-old son, and I wanted to ask you, what would you recommend to, what shall I do to make him safe from pornography when it is just 2 clicks away, everywhere, available for free? What shall I do as a father?
Huh, yeah, wow. How about asking me a difficult question? No, yeah, the whole existence of pornography is critically important to have it banned, very important across the board, every aspect of pornography. And cartoons are particularly disastrous, by the way. You know, the cartoon is especially for children. Oh my goodness. So and one of the things that works, but it's with older guys, yeah, is to point out to them that if they aren't already impotent, okay, do you follow me? Impotent, if they aren't already unable to function in a manly way. Okay, am I clear?
Yeah.
Okay, if they aren't already unable to function, they will shortly find themselves absolutely unable to function in a manly way. You know, they will be addicted to those paper dolls or the dolls on the screen, and their marital opportunities will go out the window or be damaged tremendously, because they'll expect the female or females, you know, they'll never be satisfied. Absolutely never. Oh yeah, because let's not ever think we can disconnect sex arousal from pornography to fear arousal and to shame arousal, okay? Fear and shame and sex arousal will happen all at the same time. That is the reason that you never find, or so seldom find, somebody opening up a pornographic image, even today, in a public place and you know, looking. There's enormous shame associated with it, and it should be, you know, and fear of being found, and so on and so on. So, and you connect that with what happens to a boy. When a boy is called on in school to answer a question that he does not know, he'll stand up and he will have a problem, right? Often, yeah. Well, it's associated with the same thing, fear and shame. The hangings were stopped. We used to have public hangings. They were stopped. Why? They were stopped because you hang a guy in the public and there's a reaction that happens. And that was one of the reasons that the hangings were stopped, because the public was having a great time, but this was not, you know, a good thing. The sex act, it's reproductive organs, remember. Those are your reproductive organs. Calling them your sex organs makes it a problem, because your reproductive organs go from your brain straight down through the central nervous system into your reproductive organs. That is associated with shame, with fear, and often then it becomes, you have to do more and more and more to feel more shame to get the arousal, to feel more fear to get the arousal. So that's the addiction issue. You've got to increase the fear, increase the shame to get the arousal that you originally got from just looking at a, you know, pinup or whatever. Make sense?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
I think we are approaching to the end of our meeting. It's our time, I think. It's nearly 20 past 9 in Poland.
Oh,
yeah. I'd like to thank you, Judith, for your speech, for your effort and for your work. And I think all of us appreciate your life and your work to protect children and to talk about these topics. I think that this history in the United States are not known in Poland, and I think that it can show us something that we can avoid if we will struggle and to protect our children in the first line.
Now you have to make sure to tell everybody that my book is being published. One of my books is being published in Poland, in Polish.
In Polish.
Yeah.
We have to read it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to tell that in February will be the meeting with Catholic priest from Rome, from Pontifical University of the Holy Cross, Pablo Requena, who will talk about the demand of the eugenic abortion. We know that in October last year, the Polish Constitutional Tribunal had a sentence that eugenic abortion is illegal. It is against, it's not according to Polish constitution. I think that it is very good information for all of us, and I think not only in Poland, but all over the world. It's a good sign that we can do something. And I invite you all for this meeting. And once more, Judith, thank you very much. And I think that we will meet again somewhere, and maybe in Poland.
That would be good, especially if you brought me in to talk to Parliament.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for participating. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Very much.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
How do I say goodbye in Polish?
Do widzenia.
Do widzenia. Yeah.
Do widzenia. Polish language is very simple. In Poland, little child speak Polish.
I know. Makes me feel so stupid. Yes. Okay. Do widzenia.
See you.
Bye bye.